Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Econobox Garage. In this week's episode, the plan is to get the reinforcing started on the front wheel arches. I anticipate this will take a couple of weeks, so this is most likely going to be part one of a 2 or 3 part series. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. So time to get started on repairs on the front end here. So what I'm going to do before I get started, because I'm going to work on this side first, is I'm going to spin the bonnet around on the table. I'm also going to spin the car around so that when it comes time to test fit and what have you, it'll be easier to work on. So let's get that done first. So there I have the body turned around, so I've got access to the front end, and I've got the bonnet turned around so I can work on the passenger side wheel arch first. So let's get started on that. So what I'm going to do first with the bonnet here, so there is a little crack here that I will weld up, and then next I'm going to bend this 1/4-inch steel rod to match the profile of this arch here. I was kind of going back and forth on how I'm going to do that, but what I've decided to do to try it out first is I'm going to use one of the original wheels and tires. So using this as the form, I think once I bend the rod over that, it'll spring back to the proper radius, or very close to the radius of the wheel arch. So let's give that a try. Well, I've clamped one of the wheels in my old Workmate, and I've left a bit of a gap at the edge here, so I can slide the 1/4-inch rod in there, and it's just held up here so it doesn't slide down. So that's the setup. Let's give it a try and see how it turns out. Well, that worked to a certain degree, but the radius is still quite a bit off. So what I'm going to try and do is I'll use the wheel with no tire on it. So I'll try and keep the rod in the lip of the wheel as opposed to the bottom of it. I've marked the wheel arch where I want my reinforcing rod to go, and that's from this mark here, which lines up with the front edge of the little reinforcing bit that comes from the factory, all the way up to here, which is where the arch starts to kick in quite a bit. I'm not worried about stress up in here. The bulk of the stress is in this area here, which is why you often see the little stress cracks like I've got here, and much worse on the other side. So I have my bar just about to the right shape. As far as the arch itself is concerned, there is a little bit of a curve that goes this way, so I'm going to have to work that into my piece, and then once that is done, we can start welding it in. I was trying to figure out how best to bend this without actually kinking the rod, so I thought of, I'm going to call it the 3 screwdriver route. So basically I'm going to hang the screwdrivers in the vise, and I'll put the rod in front of the outside 2 and behind the middle one, so that'll kind of, when I close the vise up, it'll bend it a bit, and if I just work the piece around slowly, hopefully will result in a relatively smooth bend that will work in the front part of that wheel arch. So let's give that a try. kind of hard to see, but the reinforcing piece is clamped in underneath the flange there, just to give you an idea of how that's going to look. So what I'll do is I'll just clamp either side of each weld before I do it, and that way I make sure everything's good and tight. So now that we've got that ready, it's time for some cleanup, and weld through primer and fire up the welder. Now, before I take the tape off and forget which end is which, I just put a little X with a hacksaw in the end that goes to the back of the arch. So that way I know which end goes where without the tape in place. So to help me make the bar for the other side, I've got the piece of the passenger side here. What I'm going to do is measure how far up the end is there so I know which way to bend it. I can't just use this one as a template because it goes the opposite direction. At least I have some reference to help me start putting that together, seeing as the other side is a bit bent. Well, a slight change of plans. I thought rather than weld this one in and then make the one for the other side, I will make the one for the opposite side so that I can get a closer match, and then weld the two of them in at the same time. So there we have the two reinforcing pieces for each of the wheel arches. This one's for the passenger side, and this one is for the driver's side or left side of the car here. So their profile is pretty much exactly the same. So I'm glad I did it this way rather than weld the one end and then just try and make the other one, because the edge on the left hand side is a bit messed up on the bonnet itself. So I'll be doing it this way. This one can serve as a dual purpose to help me get things realigned in here, because as you can see it's got a bend here that will need to get addressed, and it's all that. So that'll give me a nice edge to work with. So next up, I'll get everything cleaned up and ready for welding. Now I did have a little crack in the flange here, but I noticed too that this was just bowed out a little bit. So what I've done is I've actually put a ratchet strap from the headlight bucket on the far side over to here, and just it didn't take much. I just needed to pull it in a little bit. So now I can level out the two sides of that split, make sure both sides are clean, and then I'll weld that up with a piece of copper in behind. Okay, well I'm all set up now to just weld the little crack that's here. I've got my copper clamped in underneath so I don't get the blow through, and once that's done, then I can start work on drilling a bunch of holes along the edge here to plug weld that reinforcing rod in. I've already taken the angle grinder with a 120 grit flappy disc along the edge here to get all the paint off. I didn't want to use anything coarser because I didn't want to remove, or I wanted to remove as little metal as possible through there, because that's not the thickest of material to start with. One thing I thought I should do is probably check where that split was on top of the flange. You can see that split also extends down on the face, so I'm going to weld that up as well before I go any further. Okay, so the split is right there. Kind of hard, again, it's hard to see, but the split is right there. So I've got the copper right on the back there clamped into place so I don't blow through when I'm welding. Well, I've got the primer in there and it's nice and dry now, so I'm going to get the welder fired up again and get that reinforcing welded in. Well, that wasn't very successful. Didn't get much of a bite on the bar there, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grind these welds back and then drill slightly larger holes, not where I've welded, so go in between and probably put a few more in and see if that'll help. Okay, so what I've done is I've cleaned up all the old welds on the back side and on the front side. I've drilled more holes and slightly larger than the old ones. And then also what I did, and I don't know why I didn't do this before, I took the floppy disk and put a flat edge on the reinforcing bar where it meets the flat of the wheel arch flange. So that way I'll get a tighter fit and hopefully be able to get the welds to take a lot better than they did on the first attempt. So let's give this a try and see where we end up. Well, that looks a lot better and it's a lot more solid. But before I go grinding off these welds here, I'm going to flip the bonnet back up on its end and I'm going to put a couple of tacks in behind where at each of these welds from the other side, just to help strengthen it up a bit. But that's all I have time for this week. So in the next episode, I'll get to work on the other side after finishing off this arch here. I will apply the lessons I've learned on this side to doing the repairs on the passenger side of the bonnet. If you enjoyed the video, please share it with your friends. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon so you'll get notified when the next video comes out. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.